What is the saddest video game you have played and why? The Beginner's Guide. It's not a traditional game per se. It's more a story of an indie game developer sinking into depression as narrated by his friend. You play the games and levels that he made before he stopped making games. There was a flash game called Cold Case. You are a ghost trying to solve your and other nearby ghosts' murders. In the end you help your grieving girlfriend find her next relationship. It got me to thinking about much it must suck to be a ghost and be forced to watch your loved ones move on without you. That reminds me a bit to the game Murdered, Soul Suspect. A game where your character dies twice, literally. His ghost dies because his corpse was double tapped with a pistol and he is forced to help other ghosts find their closure and discover who murdered him so he can finally go to the afterlife with his deceased wife. Probably Soma. The ending hit me hard and I proceeded to have an existential crisis for the next week. Probably That Dragon. Cancer. I don't usually play video games, but I read about this one in a tech magazine, and I was intrigued by the concept. The game was designed by Ryan Green, whose 5-year-old son Joel died of cancer. TDC is intended to help people understand what his family went through when their son got diagnosed, 12 months old, and what they experienced while raising him. The game explores what you do in life when the level is broken, when you can't get to the goal, no matter what you do. The goal of the game is not to win or get to the next level, but to find the moments of grace in the darkest of times. It is an exploration game where the player is able to interact with the characters and make certain choices, similar to those that the Green family had to face while their son was growing up. Alongside the interactivity, the game includes narration from both Ryan Green and his wife Amy, as well as recordings such as voice emails that they had made during their time with their son. Some of the scenes also include cards, letters, and other mementos of support for the Greens, sent in by people that had experienced similar losses in their life. It was touching to see these elements included. Among the sleep, you're a toddler trying to survive all these scary scenarios. Spoiler alert. At the end you realize the whole game was about you as a child trying to escape trauma and then finding out your mother in the game was an abusive alcoholic and that's who you were running from the whole time, and at the end you're getting taken away on your birthday. That game messed me up for a minimum. Valiant Hearts. The only piece of entertainment I've cried at that I can recall recently. I even knew the ending and it still got me. Rhyme. It is a game on loss, depression, recovery, and understanding what happened. And I started playing it not too long after losing a good friend a couple years ago. Not me, my son. Played an indie game wherein two brothers go on a quest to find water from the Tree of Life to save their dad from dying. The game can only be played by working together, as in each controller is half controlled by the other player. The quest takes them through dangers and phobias and the brothers bond. They then meet and are befriended by a young woman whom the older brother is attracted to and turns out to be a spider who bites him. They are able to vanquish the spider, but the older brother is mortally wounded. Still they press on and make it to the tree. Too weak to climb it, the older brother stays behind whilst the younger one climbs the tree and retrieves the precious water. When he gets back, the older brother has passed away. He cries and pours the water from the tree onto him, and at first, as he hugs his brother, it seems to have worked. But it is only an illusion, and the younger brother, realizing that he's really on his own, lays his brother to rest and makes his way home. He has to face his fear of water alone, without the brother there to support and cheer him on. He eventually makes it back in time to save his dad, but it is so sad. When my son was describing the game to me, I was crying like a baby. I told him I had no idea games were so artistic. Such a beautiful way to convey art. This war of mine. That's how it is and was for most of the people that lived through it, and some still do, unfortunately. To the Moon. 4 hours indie game about an old man on his deathbed trying to fulfill a childhood promise. It's a story about trauma and love and memories, and it uses the video game medium so well to tell it. With just the occasional joke, to keep you from immediately killing yourself. Part of its power probably comes from the music. Some really heart-wrenching piano songs in there just came out on Switch or Steam. Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons really got to me. Ori and the Will of the Wisps had a really sad story. Firewatch, that beginning. Up-level feels. Towards the end too. Finding the truth. Won't spoil it, but it hit hard. Mother 3, not gonna tell you why. Play it. Not the whole game, but a side quest in The Witcher 3 got me to cry for the first, and only time so far, to a game. In the quest Black Pearl, you find a black pearl for this guy's wife. You ask him if she liked it, and he says he isn't sure. You press him, and it turns out his wife has some sort of Alzheimer's/dementia and doesn't act the same or remember things. The black pearl was something they always joked about, and he hoped giving her one would sort of bring her back. It doesn't, and I've had family members succumb to the same type of afflictions, and it's heart-wrenching to see. Lisa, the Painful. I didn't play it, but watched my now husband play it like 4 years ago. The game is about a broken man in search of his adopted daughter through a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Drugs, sacrifice, losing limbs, and seemingly pointless, but very much intended quests. The whole thing is dark, but with a few chuckles. Wept like a baby onto the moon. Last of Us, the story just sticks. The characters are so fun and interesting, or badass, or ruthless and you wanna murder them. It's a video game filled with emotional thrills and deep pauses where the music really shines. Got the music. This War of Mine, such a different game. So hard to describe what it means to become those everyday people stuck in the middle of a war zone. What your decisions mean, and how hard it is to remain human when so much inhumanity surrounds you. Deep game filled with morality and sadness. RDR2, the ending and the fate of Arthur. The way the game's story sorta gets you there. All of it is heartbreaking, and with a game so rich with detail and hours upon hours of gameplay, it's hard not to grow close to the characters, and not to feel a part of the gang once it all goes to shit. Madden 20, every time I play it, I just cry, because it's such a bad game. MGS3, one of the best prequels ever conceived by man. FF10 from Zinnekin to the end. Knew what was coming, but still hit deep. I'm sorry I couldn't show you Zinnekin. I think that's the hardest it ever cried while playing a game. Heck, I'm getting teary-eyed just thinking about it. Spec Ops: The Line. The choices you had to make in that game were truly saddening. Titanfall 2, damn that Protocol 3, protect the pilot. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Time, Darkness, Sky. The scenes near the climax of the game are done very well with music that tugs on your heartstrings. Lol. Kinda surprised that I haven't seen this one yet. Mass Effect 3. Of course the quality of the ending is a big point for most alongside anger, but outside of that a lot of people start dying, and sometimes there's nothing you can do to save them, no matter how you played out the trilogy. It winds up being quite the sad adventure. Crazy how we knew Thane was terminally ill when we first got him, yet his death still wound up being a huge gut punch. Even then he ducking threw down with Kay like a damn boss in such a way that I really wanted to see what a perfectly healthy Thane in his prime could do, yet all I could do later was sit by his bedside as his time came. Mordin's death turned one of his most prominent quotes into a tearjerker as he sacrifices himself to ensure the job got done right. The man went from assuring the near sterilization of a species to dying to save said species. Legion hurt too. Funny how if asked to rank the Mass Effect 2 squad by favorites, Legion would be towards the bottom of my list while still being a solid character. But we get to Rannoch, and he hits you with a "does this unit have a soul?" in a callback to the question that kicked off a war, and it winds up being the beginning of peace between his and Tailai's people. It's not just prominent characters either. Best example of more minor characters is the Krogan chair, Oh Blue Rosavilium, dying during the Arachne raid, and we have to deliver his final words to Ariba, and we find out they had a kid on the way. I know this doesn't compare to many new games, but Super Paper Mario was a trip. Y'all never expect a Mario game to have that kinda depressing lore. Majora's Mask. Something about that game is just very unsettling, and yet melancholy at the same time. From sitting in a bar with some people you looked up to at the last few minutes before the world ends to Link's pain of being alone. Just listening to the music gives those vibes, as well as just most of the story and atmosphere. And if you go into the 5 stages of grief there it becomes even more so. It's a beautiful game. It's beautifully hopeless and heart-crushing. Not in the way a good story that makes people die can, but in just a beautiful eerie way. You are the hero, but there will always be people beyond saving, including yourself. Nier Automata. Probably. So many side quests with depressing endings. Shadow of the Colossus. Because reasons, and the God of War series. Because behind all the rage and gore, Kratos actually has a very sad story. Gears of War 3. The mission where Dom dies Link. B/Prob1 Kai 5P4 always gets to me. He gets eaten up by his wife's death and sacrifices himself to save his team. He was always the player 2 in the year's games, so it was really heartbreaking if you played on split screen like I did. Some 8 got thrown under the bus because it was made by the guys who made Amnesia, and it mostly gets interesting by mid-game. Everyone expected a scary game, and the scary parts are not scary at all, especially in the beginning. But holy ducking Christ, does that game leave you with your jaw dropped and an existential crisis to haunt you for life. I've never watched the ending credits and think about my existence while listening to a sad piano song ever before. I highly recommend everyone to play it. I finished it in 10 hours on a slow playthrough, so it's not that long. I'm serious. It's so underrated because people expected scary Amnesia 2.0. It's insane. Army of 2. There are few different endings depending on how you finish the game. However, there is one in particular that stayed with me. I was young at that time, so it hit even deeper. Great game. Heavy Rain has a really sad plotline of loss and a father's love. The antagonist in the story is going around kidnapping children to torture the fathers, believing that men should be tested to be worthy of being called a father. This was due to an incident that had occurred in the antagonist's childhood where his brother had fallen through a hole in a storm drain at a construction site. The antagonist tries to get help, but his drunk father dismisses it and beats the antagonist for disrupting him, resulting in the death of the antagonist's brother. First part of The Last of Us was pretty brutal. True pacifist and genocide runs of Undertale. You know why. Life is Strange was pretty tough in a few different spots. The assisted suicide scene, and then the whole plot in the last chapter was just so dark. Not to mention the choice in the end was pretty brutal too. Ironically, The Sims. I watch them live lives without depression, anxiety, abuse. I watch them build families, friendships, love, and amazing careers. They have hobbies and quirks and personalities. I just get so sad thinking of everything they have that I never will. Telltale's The Walking Dead. That shit hit different. How has nobody said LOZ, Majora's Mask yet? The protagonist starts off on a mission to find his friend that he went through hell and high water with in the previous game. He never finds her. A later game in the series heavily hinted that he never found her and died alone and forgotten in the Lost Woods. You watch as people literally change over the course of 3 days, reacting to an Armageddon scenario that everyone sees coming, but nobody can stop or do literally anything about. The main antagonist is a lonely child who looks like has throwing a suicidal cosmic tantrum, until it becomes clear that has basically being manipulated by an insane evil spirit, who then casts him aside and dismisses him as garbage. The main 3 transformation masks are the spirits of dead people who you need to help find peace. And at the very end, Link leaves, presumably taking the masks with him. The Gorons have lost their champion. Lula's children will never know their father, and the Deku butler will mourn his son forever. No matter what you do, there's just plain not enough time to save everyone. Halo Reach from the beginning, you know the end. Objective, survive. I wasn't really emotionally prepared for the end of Bioshock Infinite. Metal Gear Solid 5. Spoiler warning. There is a part in the game where the men in your army who respect and would die for you become infected by a highly infectious and deadly parasite. You get goggles to see who is infected and have to kill dozens of your men one at a time while they are saluting you and trusting you to do the right thing. I legitimately cried my eyes out over the way this one went down. Journey. Especially when you go the entire way with someone. Then the long painful trudge up the mountain. Night in the woods. What is sadder is what happened to the designer Iril as well. Super Mario Galaxy made me very emotional. The combination of the orchestra music, the setting, and especially when the main Luma and all the other Lumas jumped into the black hole to save the whole galaxy, or whatever it was, with the combination of the Rosalina storybook song playing. It all just made me cry when I was little. The only game I played that made me really cry the way I did, even though it was virtual. It really hit me in the heart, and still does. Mother 3 for sure. I cried at least 3 times my first playthrough. For me, Horizon Zero Dawn. Those audio tapes. Man, I had to take a break after some of them. Hey, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.